Dr. Jonathan Hayes stood on the marble balcony of his penthouse, gazing out at the glittering Boston skyline. The city stretched endlessly before him, a tapestry of lights that represented everything he had conquered in his 42 years of life. His Rolex caught the moonlight as he adjusted his silk tie, preparing for another night of hollow social engagements. The penthouse around him was a monument to success. Italian leather furniture filled rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, original. Paintings worth more than most people's houses adorn the walls. His garage held a collection of luxury cars that could fund a small hospital. Yet as Jonathan looked at his reflection in the window, he saw a man who had everything except the one thing that mattered most: genuine happiness. His phone buzzed with another invitation to an exclusive charity gala. The same faces, the same conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Jonathan had built an empire in cardiac surgery, becoming one of the youngest billionaire doctors in America. His hands could repair the most complex heart defects, but he had never learned how to heal his own emotional wounds. The tragedy that drove him to medicine haunted every success. His younger brother Thomas had died at age 16 from a heart condition that could have been easily treated if their family had been wealthy enough to afford the best care. That loss had fueled Jonathan's relentless pursuit of excellence and wealth. He had sworn that no one would ever die because they couldn't afford the best medical treatment. Now, 26 years later, Jonathan saved lives every day in his private practice. Celebrities, politicians, and business tycoons paid astronomical fees for his expertise. But something was missing from his perfect life. The relationships felt transactional, the conversations calculated, and the women in his social circle seemed more interested in his bank account than his heart. Jonathan had tried dating within his wealthy circle countless times, beautiful, educated women who understood his world of luxury and prestige. Yet every relationship felt like a business merger rather than a love story. They discussed art collections over champagne, traveled on private jets to exotic destinations, and attended galas where they were photographed for society magazines. But beneath the glamour, Jonathan felt profoundly alone. His assistant knocked on his office door the next morning. "Dr. Hayes, don't forget about your commitment at Boston General Hospital today. You're scheduled to see patients in the charity clinic." Jonathan had made a promise to himself years ago to spend one day each month treating patients who couldn't afford his private practice fees. It was his way of honoring Thomas's memory and staying connected to his original purpose as a healer. These charity days often reminded him why he became a doctor in the first place. The drive from his penthouse to Boston General took him through neighborhoods he rarely visited. The contrast was stark. Bentley moved through areas where people struggled to pay rent, worked multiple jobs, and worried about medical bills. Jonathan often wondered what his life would have been like if Thomas had lived, if his family hadn't faced that devastating financial crisis during his brother's illness. Boston General Hospital buzzed with activity as Jonathan arrived. The contrast to his private practice was immediate and jarring. Here, families waited anxiously in crowded rooms, clutching insurance forms and hoping for good news. The hallways smelled of disinfectant rather than the expensive cologne that filled his private clinic. But there was something authentic about this environment that his luxury practice lacked. Nurse Rebecca Martinez greeted him with a warm smile. She had worked at Boston General for 15 years and always appreciated when the wealthy doctors volunteered their time. "Good morning, Dr. Hayes. We have a full schedule today. There's one patient in particular I think you should see first. She's been waiting 3 months for this appointment." Rebecca handed him a file marked Emma Thompson, 24 years old, suspected valvular heart disease. As Jonathan reviewed the medical history, he noticed something unusual. The patient had been avoiding medical care despite clear symptoms of a serious heart condition. Her financial information showed she worked as a librarian in a small Vermont town, earning barely enough to cover basic living expenses. Jonathan made his way to examination room 7, expecting another routine consultation. He had seen thousands of patients over the years and had developed an efficient, professional approach that maintained appropriate emotional distance. But when he opened the door, something unexpected happened that would change his life forever. Emma Thompson sat in the corner chair, looking like she wanted to disappear into the wallpaper. She wore a simple blue sweater that seemed too large. For her petite frame and her long auburn hair fell like a curtain around her face. When she looked up, Jonathan was struck by the most beautiful green eyes he had ever seen. But it wasn't just their color that caught his attention. It was the depth of vulnerability and fear he saw in them. "Miss Thompson, I'm Dr. Hayes," he said, his usual professional tone softening instinctively. "I understand you've been experiencing some chest pain and shortness of breath." Emma nodded silently, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. Jonathan had treated anxious patients before, but something about Emma's fear seemed different. It wasn't just medical anxiety. It was something deeper, more personal. As Jonathan began taking her medical history, he noticed how Emma flinched. Whenever he moved closer, her voice was barely above a whisper, and she seemed to choose each word carefully. When he explained that he would need to listen to her heart, Emma's entire body tensed as if she were preparing for battle. "I'll need to place the stethoscope on your chest," Jonathan explained gently. "Is that okay with you?" Emma's face flushed red, and she looked terrified. I've never—" she started, then stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Jonathan had performed thousands of cardiac examinations, but something about Emma's reaction made him pause. He called for Nurse Rebecca to join them, sensing that Emma needed additional comfort and support. When Rebecca entered with her maternal presence, the atmosphere in the room shifted slightly. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Rebecca said with genuine warmth. "Dr. Hayes is the best heart doctor in the city. You're in excellent hands." As Emma reluctantly agreed to the examination, Jonathan noticed details that spoke to a life very different from his own. Her clothes were clean but clearly old and well-worn. She carried no expensive jewelry or designer accessories. Her shoes were practical rather than fashionable. Everything about her spoke of someone who lived simply but with dignity. The examination revealed what Jonathan had suspected from her symptoms. Emma had a serious heart valve condition that would require surgery within the next 6 months. Without treatment, her condition would continue to deteriorate, potentially becoming life-threatening. "Miss Thompson, you have what we call mitral valve regurgitation," Jonathan explained carefully. "Your heart valve isn't closing properly, which makes your heart work harder than it should. We can fix this with surgery, but it shouldn't be delayed too long." Emma's face went pale. "Surgery? How much does something like that cost?" The question hit Jonathan unexpectedly. In his private practice, cost was rarely discussed. As wealthy, patients simply scheduled procedures and paid the bills. But Emma's question revealed a reality he often forgot existed: people making life-or-death decisions based on money. The surgery would typically cost around $150,000 at a private hospital, Jonathan said honestly. But there are options through insurance and public programs. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "My insurance has a high deductible, and there's a waiting list for the public programs. How long can I wait?" Jonathan found himself studying Emma's face as she processed this information. There was something about her quiet strength and dignity in the face of this devastating news that moved him deeply. She wasn't asking for charity or special treatment. She was simply trying to understand her options. As their consultation ended, Jonathan made a decision that surprised even him. "Miss Thompson, would it be possible for me to visit you at your workplace? I'd like to discuss some additional options for your treatment." Emma looked confused, but grateful. "I work at the Riverside Public Library in Vermont. But Dr. Hayes, you don't need to go to all that trouble for me." Jonathan smiled, and for the first time in months, it was completely genuine. "It's no trouble at all. Sometimes the best medical decisions are made outside of hospital walls." Evening, Jonathan canceled his plans to attend a gallery opening in Back Bay. Instead, he found himself researching the small town of Riverside, Vermont, where Emma worked. The library's website showed a modest brick building surrounded by maple trees. Emma's staff photo revealed the same shy smile he had seen that day. But in her professional environment, she looked more confident and at peace, as Jonathan prepared for bed in his luxury penthouse. He couldn't stop thinking about the contrast between his world and Emma's. She faced a life-threatening medical condition with grace and dignity, never once complaining about the unfairness of her situation. Her quiet strength reminded him of something he had lost along his journey to wealth and success: the ability to find meaning in simple, iconic connections. For the first time in years, Jonathan fell asleep thinking about someone other than himself. He dreamed of green eyes and wondered what it would be like to know someone who valued authenticity over achievement, found purpose in serving others. Rather than accumulating wealth, the next morning, Jonathan made another uncharacteristic decision. Instead of heading to his private practice, he drove north toward Vermont. He told himself he was simply following up on a patient's care, but deep down, he knew something more significant was happening. Emma Thompson had awakened something in his heart that had been dormant for decades. As his Bentley wound through the mountains of rural Vermont, Jonathan realized he was about to enter a world completely different from anything he had known. The small towns, the simple lifestyles, the people who worked hard for modest wages and found joy in things that couldn't be bought with money. The riverside. Public library sat on a quiet street lined with old maple trees. As Jonathan parked his expensive car, he noticed several people glancing curiously at the vehicle. He suddenly felt overdressed in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. But his curiosity about Emma's world overcame his discomfort. Inside the library, Jonathan discovered a warm, welcoming space filled with the gentle sounds of pages turning. In quiet conversations, children sat in a reading circle, listening to a story. Elderly residents read newspapers in comfortable chairs, worked quietly at tables covered with textbooks and notebooks. He found Emma shelving books in the poetry section, completely absorbed in her work. She wore a simple green dress that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. When she noticed him, her face lit up with surprise, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Dr. Hayes, what are you doing here?" Jonathan realized he didn't have a good answer to that question. He had driven 3 hours to see a patient, something he had never done before in his career. But looking at Emma in her natural environment, he knew he had made the right decision. Emma stood frozen among the poetry books, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with her medical condition. Dr. Jonathan Hayes looked completely out of place in the small-town library, his expensive suit and commanding presence drawing curious glances from the regular patrons. She had never imagined he would actually come to Vermont, let alone seek her out in her workplace. "I wanted to see where you spend your days," Jonathan said, his voice softer than it had been in the hospital. "I have a proposal regarding your treatment that I'd prefer to discuss somewhere more comfortable than a medical office." Emma felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. The idea of this wealthy, sophisticated doctor seeing her modest world made her acutely aware of the vast differences between their lives. "I can take a break," she whispered, leading him to a quiet corner near the large windows overlooking the town square as they sat at one of the worn wooden tables. Jonathan found himself genuinely curious about Emma's life. "How long have you worked here?" 6 years, Emma replied, her voice gaining strength as she talked about something she loved. "I started part-time while finishing my library science degree. The head librarian, Mrs. Patterson, took a chance on me even though I was very shy. She said libraries need people who understand that books can be friends when people feel lonely." Jonathan watched Emma's transformation as she spoke about her work. The frightened patient from the hospital disappeared, replaced by a young woman with quiet passion and purpose. Her eyes lit up when she described helping children discover their first favorite book or assisting elderly residents with research for their family genealogies. "What about you?" Emma asked suddenly, then immediately looked embarrassed by her boldness. "Why did you become a doctor? You could probably do anything you wanted with your money and connections." The question caught Jonathan off guard. Most people in his circle knew his background, or at least pretended to. But Emma's innocent curiosity felt genuine, without any hidden agenda or social calculation. "My younger brother died when I was 18, Jonathan found himself saying. "He had a heart defect that could have been easily fixed, but we couldn't afford the surgery at the time. By the time we raised enough money, it was too late." Emma's eyes filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating." Jonathan nodded, surprised by how easily he had shared that painful memory. His name was Thomas. He was brilliant, funny, and kind, Everything I'm not. He paused, realizing how much he had revealed. I became a heart surgeon to make sure no one else would lose someone they loved because of money. But that's exactly what's happening to me, Emma said quietly. Her words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. Despite all his wealth and expertise, despite his promise to honor Thomas's memory, he was about to let another person suffer because of financial barriers. The irony was devastating. That's actually why I'm here, Jonathan said, leaning forward. I want to perform your surgery at my private facility, no charge. Emma's face went pale, then flushed red. I can't accept charity, Dr. Hayes. I may not have much money, but I have my dignity. Jonathan admired her pride, even as it frustrated him. In his world, people routinely accepted expensive gifts and favors as part of social networking. But Emma operated by different rules, ones he was beginning to respect deeply. It's not charity, he insisted. Consider it a medical research case. Your condition is interesting from an academic standpoint. Emma studied his face carefully. You're lying to make me feel better about accepting help. Jonathan was shocked by her directness. In his social circle, such blunt honesty would be considered rude, but from Emma, it felt refreshing rather than offensive. You're right, he admitted. I want to help you because I care what happens to you, not as a research case, but as a person. Why? Emma's question was simple but profound. You don't know me? You've spent maybe an hour together total. Jonathan struggled to answer. How could he explain that her authenticity had awakened something in him that years of wealth and success had buried? That her quiet dignity reminded him of the idealistic young man who had entered medical school determined to heal the world. Because? You remind me of why I became a doctor in the first place, he said finally. Because refusing help when you need it won't honor your dignity, it will just put your life at risk. Emma was quiet for a long time, watching children play in the square outside. If I say yes, what happens afterward? You save my life, and then you go back to your world of wealthy patients and fancy hospitals. Where does that leave me? The question revealed how deeply Emma had thought about their situation. She understood that accepting his help would create a connection between them that went beyond a normal doctor-patient relationship. I don't know, Jonathan answered honestly. But I do know that I'd like to find out. These past few days, thinking about you and your situation, I've felt more purpose than I have in years. Emma looked directly into his eyes, searching for something she could trust. Dr. Hayes, I need to tell you something about myself. Something that might change how you see me. Jonathan waited, sensing that whatever Emma was about to share would be significant. I've never been in a relationship, Emma said, her voice barely audible. I've never even been on a real date. When you examined my heart in the hospital, that was the first time any man had ever touched me, even medically. The revelation hit Jonathan with unexpected force. In his world of casual relationships and sophisticated women, Emma's innocence seemed almost impossible. She was 24 years old, beautiful and intelligent. Yet she had lived a life of complete solitude when it came to romantic connections. Why? He asked gently, without judgment. Emma's eyes filled with tears. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 18, I focused completely on finishing school and building a career. I was too sad, too busy, and too scared to let anyone close. Books became my companions. The library became my sanctuary. I convinced myself that I didn't need anything else. Jonathan felt a deep ache in his chest. While he had been building walls around his heart with wealth and success, Emma had been building walls with solitude and self-protection. They had both chosen isolation, just in different ways. Emma, he said, using her first name for the first time. Your heart condition isn't going to wait for the perfect time. Let me help you. Not because you owe me anything, but because someone should have helped my brother when he needed it. Emma wiped away a tear and nodded slowly. Okay, but I want to pay you back somehow, even if it takes years. The only payment I want is the chance to get to know you better, Jonathan said. Would you have dinner with me tonight? Somewhere quiet where we can talk? Emma looked terrified and hopeful at the same time. I don't know how to do this, Dr. Hayes. I don't know how to be around someone like you. My name is Jonathan, he said with a smile. And you don't have to be anyone other than exactly who you are. That's what I find most attractive about you. That evening, Jonathan took Emma to a small restaurant overlooking Lake Champlain. It was nothing like the five-star establishments he usually frequented, but the simple, honest food and quiet atmosphere felt perfect for their first real conversation. As two people rather than doctor and patient, Emma wore a simple black dress that she had borrowed from her coworker. And she looked more beautiful than any woman Jonathan had ever seen at the most exclusive social events. Her natural beauty, unenhanced by expensive makeup or designer clothing, took his breath away. "Tell me about your life before you became successful," Emma said, as they waited for their food. "What were you like as a young man?" Jonathan found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years. His childhood in a working-class family in South Boston, his father's job at the shipyard, his mother's work as a school secretary, the financial struggles that made Thomas's medical bills impossible to handle, his determination to never feel powerless again when someone he loved needed help. "I worked 3 jobs to pay for medical school," Jonathan said. "I slept for hours a night for years. I had no social life, no relationships, no fun. All I cared about was becoming the best surgeon possible and making enough money to never worry about medical bills again." "When did you stop being that determined, young man, and become the person you are now?" Emma asked Percent Prevener. Jonathan paused, realizing that Emma saw something in him that he had lost sight of himself. Somewhere along the way, the money and success became more important than the original purpose. "I started measuring my worth by my bank account instead of by the lives I saved." "But you still do charity work at the hospital," Emma pointed out. "That determined young man is still there." Jonathan looked at Emma across the candlelit table, amazed by her insight. "You see things in people that they can't see in themselves." "Books taught me that," Emma said with a shy smile. "When you read enough stories about human nature, you learn to recognize the difference between who someone is and who they pretend to be." As the evening progressed, Jonathan felt something he had never experienced before: complete comfort in being himself. With Emma, there was no need to impress or maintain a sophisticated image. She was interested in his thoughts, his dreams, his fears, not his achievements or possessions. "Emma, can I ask you something personal?" Jonathan said as they shared dessert. "Haven't you been asking personal questions all evening?" she replied with more confidence than she had shown before. "What scares you most about the surgery?" Emma was quiet for a moment. "Dying alone," she said finally. "I don't have any family. If something goes wrong, there won't be anyone there who really cares whether I make it through." Jonathan reached across the table and took her hand. "Won't be alone. I'll be there, and I care more than you know." The touch of his hand sent electricity through Emma's entire body. It was such a simple gesture. But for someone who had never experienced physical affection from a man, it felt overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. "Jonathan," she said, using his first name hesitantly, "why does someone like you care?" "About someone like me? We're from completely different worlds." Jonathan squeezed her hand gently. "Because in all my success, I forgot what it felt like to meet someone real. Someone who values kindness over wealth, authenticity over status. You've reminded me of who I wanted to be when I was young and idealistic. And you've shown me that there are still good people in the world," Emma replied. "People who use their success to help others instead of just accumulating more for themselves." As Jonathan drove Emma home to her small apartment above the bakery, both of them knew that something significant had changed between them. What had started as a doctor-patient relationship had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful. "Thank you for dinner," Emma said as they stood outside her apartment. "And thank you for giving me hope." Jonathan looked at her face in the soft glow of the streetlight, memorizing every detail. "Thank you for reminding me why life is worth living." When Emma stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek goodnight, Jonathan felt his carefully constructed emotional walls crumble completely. This shy, gentle librarian had accomplished what years of therapy and self-reflection had failed to achieve. She had reached his heart. The morning of Emma's surgery arrived, gray and drizzly, matching the anxiety. That had kept both Emma and Jonathan awake most of the night. Emma sat in the pre-operative room at Jonathan's private hospital, wearing the standard surgical gown that made her look even smaller and more vulnerable than usual. Jonathan had spent weeks preparing for this surgery. With an attention to detail that surprised even his experienced surgical team. He had studied Emma's case files countless times, consulted with colleagues, and planned every aspect of the procedure. But his meticulous preparation couldn't calm the emotional turmoil he felt about operating on someone he had come to care for so deeply. "How are you feeling?" Jonathan asked as he entered Emma's room, trying to maintain his professional composure while his heart raced with personal concern. Terrified, Emma admitted with the honesty that had become her trademark. But also grateful. "I keep thinking about your brother Thomas, and how he would have given anything for this opportunity." Jonathan was moved by her perspective. Even facing major surgery, Emma was thinking about others rather than herself. It was a quality he had rarely encountered in his privileged social circle. Nurse Rebecca, who had requested to be part of Emma's surgical team, entered with her warm maternal presence. "Good morning, sweetheart. Today's going to be a wonderful day. Dr. Hayes is going to fix your heart so you can live a long, healthy life." Emma smiled nervously. "Will you stay with me until I fall asleep?" "Of course," Rebecca replied, taking Emma's hand. "And Dr. Hayes will be right there taking care of you the entire time." As the anesthesia team prepared Emma for surgery, she looked directly at Jonathan with those remarkable green eyes. "Jonathan, if something goes wrong, I want you to know that meeting you has been the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me hope when I had none." Jonathan felt tears threaten to overwhelm his professional composure. "Nothing is going to go wrong, Emma. I promise you that. And when you wake up, we're going to have a long conversation about your future, our future." Emma's eyes widened at his words, but before she could respond, the anesthesia took effect and she drifted into unconsciousness. Jonathan watched her peaceful face for a moment, then transformed into the focused, brilliant surgeon who had built his reputation on saving lives. The surgery was the most challenging and rewarding of Jonathan's career as he worked to repair Emma's damaged heart valve. He found himself talking to her unconscious form, sharing thoughts and feelings he had never expressed to anyone. "You're going to love the spring in Vermont," he whispered as he worked. "I want to see those maple trees you told me about. Want to meet Mrs. Patterson at the library. Want to understand the world that created someone as special as you." The surgical team exchanged glances, having never seen Dr. Hayes display such personal investment in a patient, but they also noticed that his technical precision was flawless. His decision-making, swift and confident. Love, rather than compromising his abilities, seemed to enhance them. 4 hours later, Jonathan emerged from the operating room with the best news possible. The surgery had been completely successful. Emma's heart valve was functioning perfectly, and her prognosis was excellent. But more importantly for Jonathan, the woman he had fallen in love with was safe. Emma's recovery was remarkable, both physically and emotionally. As she regained her strength over the following days, Jonathan spent every possible moment at her bedside. He canceled social obligations, rearranged his surgery schedule, and ignored the raised eyebrows of his colleagues who had never seen him. So personally invested in a patient, Emma said on her third day of recovery. "I can feel the difference already. My heart feels stronger, but not just because of the surgery. It feels fuller somehow." Jonathan understood exactly what she meant. His own heart, which had been operating on minimal emotional capacity for years, now felt alive with possibilities he had never imagined. "Emma, I need to tell you something," Jonathan said, taking her hand as he had done countless times during her recovery. "I know we come from different worlds, and I know this might seem crazy given how we met, but I'm falling in love with you." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy rather than fear. "Jonathan, I don't know anything about love or relationships, but what I feel for you is unlike anything I've ever experienced. You've not only saved my life, you've shown me what it means to truly live. I want to learn about your world," Jonathan continued. "I want to spend time in that library, meet your friends, understand what makes you happy, and I hope you'll let me show you some parts of my world that are worth seeing." Emma squeezed his hand with her newfound strength. "I want to try, but I'm scared. What if I don't fit into your life? What if your friends think you've lost your mind dating a small-town librarian? Jonathan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Emma, you've already changed my life more than any person I've ever known. My friends can think whatever they want. What matters is what we think, what we feel, and what we want to build together. Over the following weeks, as Emma completed her recovery, Jonathan made good on his promises. He spent weekends in Vermont, helping at the library's book sales, attending town festivals, and discovering the simple pleasures of small-town life. Emma, in turn, visited Boston, where Jonathan showed her museums, concerts, and restaurants, but more importantly, introduced her to the charitable work that had become his passion. Their relationship defied every social convention of Jonathan's previous life, but it felt more real and meaningful than anything he had ever experienced. Emma's innocence and wonder at new experiences reminded him of the joy he had lost in his pursuit of wealth and status. Her natural kindness and empathy challenged him to use his resources more thoughtfully and generously. You know what the best part of this is? Emma said one evening as they walked along Boston Harbor, 6 months after her surgery. What's that? Jonathan replied, marveling at how healthy and vibrant she looked. I finally understand what all those romance novels were talking about, Emma said with a laugh. I used to think love was just a nice idea that writers made up. I never imagined it could feel like this. Jonathan stopped walking and turned to face her. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the water, and Emma looked more beautiful than he had ever seen her. Emma Thompson, you have given me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You've given me back my heart, in every sense of the word. And you saved my life in every sense of the word, Emma replied. Not just the surgery, but showing me that I deserve to be loved. That I'm worthy of someone's time and attention and care. As Jonathan held Emma in his arms beside Boston Harbor, both of them understood that their love story was just beginning. They had bridged to completely different worlds through honesty, compassion, and a willingness to see beyond surface differences to the hearts that beat beneath. Jonathan's wealth would always be part of his identity, just as Emma's simplicity would always be part of hers. But together they had discovered something more valuable than money or status, the transformative power of authentic love. Between two people who had learned to see and value each other's true hearts, their story proved that sometimes the most unexpected connections lead to the most beautiful love stories, and that healing hearts requires more than medical expertise. It requires the courage to open oneself completely to another person, regardless of the differences that might seem to separate them. In the months and years that followed, Jonathan and Emma built a life that honored both of their worlds. They established a cardiac care foundation that provided free surgery to patients who couldn't afford treatment, ensuring that no one would face Emma's original situation. Emma completed her master's degree in library science with Jonathan's support, while Jonathan rediscovered his passion for medicine as a calling rather than just a career. Their love story became a testament to the idea that true compatibility isn't about sharing the same background or social status, but about sharing the same values, dreams, and commitment to becoming better people together. Emma's pure heart had indeed been the perfect match for Jonathan's skilled hands, and together, they proved that love really can conquer all obstacles when two people are willing to fight for each other.